Michael Mann Security Services. Welcome to Vehicle Attacks Targeting Houses of Worship. As folks start to jump on, find our page, let's knock out some admin stuff real quick as always. You can get us on our website, michaelmannsecurityservices.com. Send us a message. You can call Scott at 615-606-1006. You can also email us at scottm, SCOTTM, at michaelmannsecurityservices.com. You can also get us at contact at michaelmannsecurityservices.com. Or, of course, you can send us a message through our Facebook page at Safe with Man. Okay. As we go through, let me explain just a couple things. I'm going to show you preferred content we have coming up. So every week we provide these webinars. We're getting a lot of good feedback, so we assume the webinars are helping you guys, whether you're a church, a ministry, some sort of protected facility. So that's great. We're going to continue to do it. We love you. We appreciate you tuning in to us. And Scott loves sending the links out to everybody. But we have preferred content. That's on our website. That's in Eventbrite. So I'm going to go over just real quick what that looks like and what we have coming up. So Introduction to Vehicle Defense. This is a virtual instructor-led event. This is going to be on Tuesday night, August the 11th from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., and that is Central Standard Time. So it talks about defending yourself in your car, some things or considerations to look at as you start to look at defending yourself or some innocent person that's inside the car with you. So if you're just new to private protection, if you're worried about your family, or if you're just worried about yourself in your vehicle, tune in. I think this thing's like $10. You can register for it, and that's a 2-hour session. All right, so you hear us talk about prevention every week. I think this is webinar 18, so we've been doing this for like 18 weeks, and we're going to continue. But this is where you learn prevention. So as we talk about you should do this, or our suggestion would be to put in a prevention strategy, which we're going to talk about today. Here's where you learn these things, all right? Church Protection Specialist Module 1, Security Operations. That's going to be on Sunday, August 16th from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. That's another virtually instructor-led training session. So that's a Zoom training session. You'll come in at 1 o'clock. You're going to see us there, and we'll walk you through the basics of church protection, or what we believe the basics to be. For some folks, it goes beyond that. But this is Module 1 of 3 modules. If you go through all modules, all 3 modules, then you will get a certification, a number of private certifications from different organizations, to include some stuff from us, and then access to a video library of all the skills that we teach on all 3 modules. Next to CPS, or the Church Protection Specialist, this is the most important thing we teach. So the Israeli Security Concept through Identification, there's 2 modules. This is Module 1. We're teaching another Module 1 Sunday, August 23rd from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Same thing, folks. This is a virtual instructor-led training session. So if you're a church, you're still streaming online and you're watching your service in your jammies, you're not out there serving yet because your church is not open back up, you can watch this online in your jammies while you're eating your chocolate chip pancakes, and you can learn, seriously learn, what threat identification looks like. We teach you how to do what we're going to talk about in today's presentation and what we've talked about the past 17 weeks. All right? Okay, just some announcements real quick. Again, as people start jumping on, I want to thank some folks. So we've had the 2 weeks ago, or actually a week ago, they just completed it. Completion of our first CPS Module 1. We had church security teams out of churches in Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and our first student out of Nigeria. So I'm sure Charles is on with us. Charles, welcome as always. We know it's probably late where you are, so we appreciate it. So they actually went through the presentation Sunday before last. Once they finished their presentation, they were administered an electronic examination. So they all completed that successfully. They were sent their certificates, and in August they will be going through Module 2 and then Module 3 shortly after that, and they will finish the certification process. Our second CPS Module 1 class will happen on campus. Church in Franklin, Tennessee wanted that in person, so they're going to actually go through all 3 modules. They're going to spend a weekend with us and go through all 3 modules in person and get that certification, and that happens at the end of this month, beginning of August. We have our second student from Nigeria. She contacted me day before yesterday, wanting CPS, and she's going to be attending our CPS module in August. So Ann Clarkson from Nigeria, if you are on, welcome. welcome to Michael Mann Security Services as a student, and welcome to this webinar. I think she tuned into our terrorism webinar last week, and so that brought her to us, and so that's our second student from Nigeria. So, Ann, welcome. Seriously, Scott and I and one other member from our church security team may be heading down to Nigeria to teach some things here very, very soon. We're looking for funding for that, so we may be taking this to our brothers in Africa and sisters in Africa. So again, Ann, welcome. Charles, we hope you're on. We know it's late, or I'm assuming it's late where you guys are. Thank you for tuning in. Okay, expectations, folks. All the admin stuff out of the way. This presentation is about 30 to 40 minutes in length. This is general knowledge for you guys about vehicle attacks. So whether you are a house of worship, a church, a mosque, a temple, you have a private facility you're protecting, or you have a government facility you're protecting, we're going to give you general knowledge about what vehicle attacks are, what they look like, and how to prevent those, what that strategy looks like. Law enforcement folks and other security professionals that are on, thank you so much for tuning in. Had a police officer from California call me this morning before my run, and he was interested in jumping in. So I hope you and your partner are on the webinar watching, and welcome. Q&A at the end of this. You have any questions, I'll open that up at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions before that, shoot those to us. Scott's reading those as he navigates through the system. Okay. All right. Agenda. We're going to talk about the threat of vehicle attacks, or what I call the threat spectrum. Some people call them design basis threat, depending on what industry you're in. We're going to talk about means of attack, how they conduct these attacks with the vehicles. We're going to get into general characteristics of the adversary who actually conduct these attacks using vehicles, and we're going to get into a prevention strategy, again, about 30 minutes. Okay? All right. So here is the purpose. And again, folks, you have questions, send those questions, shoot them off on the Facebook page. That way Scott can read them, and he'll hold them till the last or till the end. And that way we've got a bank of questions. If not, at the end, you can ask when the Q&A slide comes up. So purpose: to provide security ministries and security practitioners and police officers with a general overview for vehicle as a weapon, or VAW attack. And what we're talking about, a VAW attack, that scope of that is plowing into large crowds. You're going to see some of that on videos here shortly. And then ramming into buildings, or a building, or other structures such as churches, which just happened this past week. Okay? All right, let's get into threat spectrum. Okay, so we've gone over this before, but for churches, let me kind of remind you of what's going on. So the reason I want to do this is a lot of churches still have not come back in yet. So they're not back doing live services. They're still streaming out of fear of COVID, some other issues. So I want to go over why this is important, or what you need to be thinking about if you're still, especially as a volunteer, if you're not back serving on your security ministry or team. Just a reminder of what's happened, not only over the last 15 years, but what happened over the past week. Okay. So let's talk about just terrorism attacks in general over the last, from 2004 to 2019. We went over this. We did a detailed debrief, I think, on one of our webinars about the attack on the Family Research Council in D.C. That was a terrorist attack. The adversary was captured. He was charged and convicted of terrorism. Then, of course, in Antioch, Tennessee, about 12 miles from us here, small church a couple years ago, same thing. A jihadist or a Muslim decided to attack a Christian church here in Antioch, suburb of Nashville. He, after shooting several people and killing a couple, he was tackled by some folks inside the church and held there until the police showed up. And then, obviously, he's been incarcerated. Opportunistic violence, we talk about someone with a domestic or social grievance. So some things to think about. Southern Springs, Texas. A couple years ago, the shooting down at the small Baptist church where an adversary walked in with an AR, killed 20-plus people, injured several others. That was over a domestic grievance. His estranged wife's family attended that church at one point. He conducted pre-attack surveillance based on and attacked the church based on a domestic grievance. New Life Church, we talked about that just a couple of weeks ago. We gave you a complete breakdown of that attack. That was the attack in Colorado where the adversary had a grievance with the church and with Youth of the Mission. And then, of course, we talk about mental illness, the White Settlement attack that happened in December of 19, just last year, where a homeless person who had been given things or resources from the church came back because there's a grievance with the church, and he attacked the church, killed a security team member, killed an usher, and then was killed by a security team member. All right, and then I think there were some other victims out of that had heart problems or something happened because of the attack. All right, so let's get into that. So that's what's happened over the last 15 years. So if you've been out, remember we've talked about this. Start getting ready to get back. Here's why this is important. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, a couple months ago sent out a bulletin, really that's all it was, about churches, and it said, hey, if you serve on a church security ministry or team, as you start to bring people back into your houses of worship, you might be aware that there may be some violence, nothing very specific at all. They had no indications of any threats, but what we're about to talk about here in just a second, you're going to see that was very telling. All right? So in the last weekend, so in the past week, here's what happened, or here's what has happened with churches in the United States of America. California, the same San Gabriel Mission, arson attack. Queen of Peace Catholic Church, we're going to talk about this in just a second, a vehicle attack, so a vehicle or an attack using a weapon. That just happened. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. Calvary Baptist Church in San Diego, the use of arson destroyed the entire children's ministry. In New York City, mobs tore down statues of Mary and burned them. And then at the Good Shepherd Catholic Church in Miami, a statue of Jesus was decapitated. Okay, a lot going on. So if we look at attacks that have happened with the church we talked about from like 2004, 2005 to 2019, and we look at the scope of the attacks and how they were spread out, and we talked about terrorist attacks or arson a couple of weeks ago when we talked about churches and terrorism. It's been a busy week based on what we normally experience in the church. It's been a very, very busy week, or it was actually this happened over the weekend last week. So it's been a very busy week for churches. If you serve on a church security team or volunteer ministry, be alert, folks, and we're going to talk about that. All right, so let's talk about these vehicle attacks. So using a vehicle as a weapon, just a requirement. So just like any other attack, or when we talk about intended violence, the vehicle attacks are planned and premeditated. I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. Every vehicle attack that we talk about, just like any violent attack, is going to be planned or premeditated. They're going to go through a target selection process. They're going to look at vulnerabilities, look at system weaknesses. They're going to try to observe any obstacles in place. So we talked about this before, so just basic characteristics. Most of this is the same. They must gather information about, if you are the target, they're going to gather information very specifically. They got to observe. They want to understand where their cover and concealment is going to be, both the cover story if they are caught, or if someone sees them or observes them and believe they're conducting surveillance and wants to conduct a security interview. So that's going to cover that cover story. Their concealment normally is going to be that vehicle that they're going to conduct that attack in. This is probably going to happen, we hope, before the attack. They're going to look for obstacles. Who is going to stop them? Who is watching in the parking lot to see them rehearse or conduct surveillance? They want to know where this key terrain is. What do I need to get into what do I need to get to? Where's that target area to cause the most fatalities? And, of course, they need to know how to get there, those avenues of approach. That is just a basic military process to go through to understand how to attack a target. They go through that process. We go all the way back to the book of Genesis. We understand the first murder was committed by one of Adam and Eve's sons, and he went through that same attack process. You can go into Genesis and read it. Obviously, I'm not trying to add words into Genesis, but obviously Cain went through that process. Okay. Rehearsal and dry runs. They will rehearse the attack at some point, probably on your site. This is something that you can pick up, you can see. They need the element of surprise. This is how this is successful. So believe it or not, it is a surprise when vehicles run into buildings, when vehicles mow down people. We're going to show you that here on a case study that just happened last weekend in just a second. They will conduct the attack, so the attack execution process, and then in these vehicle attacks, unless there is an IED, they may try to escape. And you're going to see this past weekend here in just a second where the adversary of that vehicle did attempt to escape, and he was caught by law enforcement officials a couple minutes later. Okay, they actually had to do a pit maneuver to stop him. Okay, so case study on a vehicle attack that just happened last week against a church, Queen of Peace Catholic Church in Ocala, Florida. So this handsome young man, Stephen Shields, 23 years old, there's this picture. I'm glad to see that the Ocala Sheriff's Office is practicing their guidelines, COVID-19, and probably social distancing. You see the mask. It's a good thing. Kudos to the Ocala Sheriff's Office. We appreciate it. Means of attack, 2. Number 1, used a vehicle and then fire or or some sort of a incendiary device or some sort of a liquid or flammable liquid, probably gasoline, to try to set the church on fire. So here's what happens. He goes through the planning process. In fact, when he was captured, he told the police during his interrogation or during his interview, after his arrest or detainment, actually started laughing, and he told the police he planned the attack. This was premeditated. He went through the process we just talked about. So, gets a van, rams into the front foyer of the church. As he rams into the front foyer of the church, the victims inside are in condition white. If you don't know what the color code, the conditions of awareness are, that color code, Cooper's color code, send us an email through Facebook, send us an email through our website, whatever. We will send you that information. All right. So they're in condition white, unaware and prepared. He crashes through the foyer. As he crashes through, one of the people in the foyer come walking up to him to ask him if he's okay, because they just believe it's an accident. He gets out of the car, I think, with a can of some sort of a flammable liquid, and then catches the inside of the foyer on fire. Once he does that, gets in the van, backs out, takes off. The police get to him very quickly. Again, they force him off the road. They get out. They take him into custody. He has a history of mental illness. There was a history of a violent incident, I think, a year before this attack, so sometime last summer. And then again, he admitted to the police that he planned this attack. So going back to the characteristics, when we look at what just happened last weekend, all of this applies as they apply with any vehicle attack. Okay, this is a picture of the van. So this is where they ran the pit maneuver to get him off the road, to get him out, to get him into custody. This is the vehicle that he used, this big van. Obviously, he selected a vehicle that he knew would breach the barrier of that foyer. That is the picture of the door that he ran through. You can see the fire hoses there, caused an extensive amount of damage based on the fire that he set after he rammed the building. So that's a picture of the foyer that he ran into. And then that's the damage done with the fire that he caused before he attempted to escape or flee the attack scene. Okay? Any questions about anything, Scott, while we're here? Nothing. Okay, let's talk about quickly the means of attack. Okay? If you have any questions about the characteristics of the attacker, or again, what this looks like, these vehicle-borne attacks, send them to Scott. He'll read those at the end of the presentation. Okay, we're going to try to get this done in 30 minutes. Means of attack. All right, so let's talk about means. What does that mean? What are they using? So let's talk about the cars. Let's talk about the vehicles while they're doing this. So in 2010, jihadists very specifically started to encourage vehicle as a weapon attacks in two magazines. That was both, or two publications. That was both through Al-Qaeda and also through ISIS. We don't have time to go over that here. I wanted to show a picture of it, but it was going to take too long. So if you want more information about those attacks or where they started to suggest or encourage, let us know and we'll send you that information. And so the vehicle attack, what we talk about is large gatherings. And so the encouragement is to look for large gatherings. That could be any place where there's crowds. That could be parades, or that could be a building with a large group gather inside of it. They also encouraged not just crowds, parades, and buildings, but also to use these vehicles to attack other vehicles for two reasons. Number one, kill more victims. Number two, if a vehicle was being used as a blockade device, then that, or it was stopping from causing additional victims, then they wanted a vehicle big enough to get through other vehicles. So there's a reason why they specifically called out other vehicles as they encouraged these attacks. Okay. So the pros of using a vehicle, and these are the things that you guys need to write down or remember. Some things that you need for your prevention strategy to remember and things that you're going to be looking for. So in the United States of America, the average weight of a vehicle is about 4,000 pounds. So that is a 4,000-pound weapon, okay? So one of the pros is, number one, what vehicle we pick. It's heavy, it's big, it's going to be hard to stop, okay? Saw some chatter on some of the church security pages on Facebook after the attack happened last week, and people were talking about, well, we train for this, we have weapons. I used to teach vehicle assaults to U.S. Department of Energy Protective Forces. I've taught vehicle assaults to SWAT teams throughout the country as I was designing anti-terrorism programs for nuclear and chemical facilities. I've taught specifically how to defend yourself in a vehicle to executive protection specialists, private citizens, and police officers. Let me tell you my experience with cars, and I've conducted actual vehicle assaults. So let me tell you my experience with vehicles. Bullets go directly through cars, but they don't stop them. Let me say that again. Bullets will go through cars, but it's going to be very difficult to stop the car with a bullet. Okay? They're going to go right through, especially handgun rounds. Okay? And just because I hit somebody in the car with a pistol round does not mean it's going to stop that person from driving or doing other things. So here's a hint again. A pistol is not going to stop a vehicle. Even if you're a good enough shot to attempt to stop the driver, that's going to have to be a really good shot. And if I get body shots, that does not mean it's going to stop the vehicle. You're going to have to shut the computer off. Okay? And even if you're lucky enough to do that, that doesn't mean that the vehicle is not a problem any longer. Okay? So, 4,000 pounds, that is a heavy weapon. Handguns are not going to be a good defense against the vehicle. Readily available. So the adversary can use his personal vehicle or her personal vehicle. They can use a rental, which you're going to see an example of that here in just a minute. They can steal or they can carjack a car to use. Okay. Another pro, so they're readily available, especially in the United States of America. Less rehearsal based on the target. So if they've conducted enough pre-attack surveillance, or if they already know the target, so if it's a church and they actually attend that church or they've been there multiple times, less rehearsal, one, if they've already conducted the surveillance, and two, they already know how to use a car. Most kids in the United States, well, I know when I was a kid, when I grew up, and I've made my kids do it, when they turn 15, they get their permit, their driving permit, or here in Tennessee they do, and then by 16 they have their license, because you don't want to take them to school anymore, okay? Or because you don't want to take them to work, or because you're tired of riding all their friends around. So here, when they turn 15, they get their permit, and then they get their license at 16, and then they get blessed by the state and they drive on their own. So here in this country, the majority of people learn to drive very, very early. And so, again, the rehearsal process in a vehicle is probably going to be a lot less than it is going to be with any other means or weapon system. Speed, surprise, and impact. Cars are fast. You can't run faster than a car. The surprise of a vehicle attack, and you're going to see what that looks like in a minute, is overwhelming. The impact, so when we start talking about bodies in vehicles, death or serious bodily injury very, very easily. And then the protection provided to the adversary. Even though obviously most vehicles are not bullet resistant, unless you spend a lot of money and you order that from some specialized company, it still provides at least concealment for that adversary. And it can also provide cover depending on where your angle is and the angle of the adversary as you are trying to stop the vehicle. So it will provide protection. And so we've got a video coming up I want you to see. So this is the Nice attack, the attack using a vehicle. I think this is back in 2016, 83 people killed and numerous people injured. I want you to watch the end of the video when the police, this is in Nice, France, as they're trying to stop the vehicle. It takes multiple rounds to stop both the driver and the vehicle to stop this attack. So the vehicles actually provide protection for the adversary. And then you're going to see speed, surprise, the impact. You're going to see all that on the video. Okay?
Il paraîtrait qu'il y a une bombe sur la promenade et moi je suis bloqué au McDo. Si je meurs, merde les terroristes.
Никто не знает почему.
Oui, allez, s'il vous plaît. Merci, c'est pour la sécurité.
L'horreur de nouveau vient de s'abattre sur la France. À Nice, cette nuit, un camion a foncé sur la foule rassemblée pour le feu d'artifice du 14 juillet avec l'intention de tuer, d'écraser et de massacrer.
Okay, so again, we talk about speed, surprise, impact, protection to the adversary inside the vehicle. You saw all that with the Nice attack. So, and it doesn't have to be a big vehicle. It can be just a passenger, or it can be like a smaller vehicle, like a passenger-sized vehicle. It doesn't have to be a big one like this truck. So, we talked about the pros of the vehicle attacks. Let's talk about the cons to the adversary. So, the adversary, and this is something else again when we talk about our prevention strategy in just a few minutes, something that you need to think about as you're looking for these adversaries as you're trying to prevent this attack. So selecting the right weapon. The adversary is going to have to, when he selects the target or she selects a target, they go out to conduct surveillance, they're going to have to select the right vehicle for the job. So it takes a little bit more of a thought process for the adversary here, or it can. It may require additional surveillance. Now, if we think about this, so churches, here's what I want you to think about. As people start coming back in to your sanctuaries, as they start coming back into the buildings, if your church has already been selected as a target, pre-attack surveillance has already been conducted, then they're going to come back and they're going to want to see and observe the number of people that are coming in. So there may be multiple points of surveillance by the adversary. And so that's going to be necessary because there may be a change in landscape, which means actually things on the target could change. If they're targeting your church or your ministry or house of worship because they've seen an announcement somewhere there's going to be some sort of an outside event with a large number of pedestrians that are not protected, then again, more than likely they're going to come and conduct that pre-attack surveillance. They're going to look to figure out that process and to figure out what's going to stop them, where their cover and concealment's going to be, and they're going to want to come back again to see right before the attack to see what they have to do and the number of people that are there. So again, things will change, and so because of that, it might require more than one element of surveillance or more than one surveillance trip. It may require the use of a secondary means of attack. The jihadists very specifically called out in these magazine articles, bring another weapon with you, so when the vehicle is stopped or you crash the vehicle into a building or people, when you get out, you can conduct a second attack. So firearms or explosives, we saw that this past weekend. As he runs through the foyer, causes injuries with that van into that Catholic church, gets out with a secondary weapon or secondary means, and lights the church on fire. Okay, so again, may require the use of secondary means of attack, which means now there's more rehearsal and more planning that the adversary has to go through. This is important for you guys to understand. So I'm going to see a video here in just a second of an attack that happened in 2017 in New York City. The adversary was a jihadist that lived in New Jersey. Pre-planned. You're going to see that here in or we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. But here, this is after the attack. So he's plowed down. He killed, I think, 8 and then wounded 15. So with the vehicle, ran over a number of people. After the vehicle is stopped, after he runs into something, an obstacle, he gets out with what appears to be a firearm in his hand. He is shot by police, and then he is taken into custody. So when we start to talk about the cons, and again, you're going to see this on this next video, may require a secondary weapon or means of attack. He had a secondary weapon or what appeared to be a secondary means of attack. All right. Any questions, Scott?
We do have a couple. At this point, we have two.
Yep, go ahead. Ask them as we go through before we get to general characteristics.
So our good friend Perry,
Yep, Perry.
he says, if a church security team member thinks a vehicle attack is underway, is deadly force an appropriate response?
Absolutely. If ability, opportunity, and jeopardy are there and you can gauge that at that second, then deadly force is authorized. But again, remember, we have to have those three elements: ability, opportunity, and jeopardy.
Jimmy, it looks like he's here in Tennessee. I'm not sure exactly where in Tennessee.
I think Jimmy may be from our church in Murfreesboro that may be one of the guys that actually attended our CPS Module 1.
That's him. You're
All right.
exactly right.
Okay.
There you go. He says, how does Michael feel about installing steel poles out in front of every door around a church? And how can we change the mindset of the church and the staff about that subject?
Yep. We're going to cover that, but I'll answer the question. If you didn't hear, that's a good question, Jimmy. So Jimmy here out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, asked the question about bollards. Use of bollards or like poles around in every door. Here's what I would say. Even though this did occur, this attack occurred at a church last weekend, this may not fall into the threat spectrum for every church. Just because it happened at this church in Florida doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen at your church. So, one, it may not happen. Two, when we start to talk about conflict avoidance. So, something I don't, look, if our threat spectrum becomes a bunch of terrorists running bombs and vehicles into churches, it's probably best for us to shut the church down or then start talking about the use of barrier systems. But until that happens, or until we get better intelligence that that's going to happen, sometimes putting bollards, one, can create conflict in the environment we're in, which if we do that, remember we talked about conflict avoidance, especially at a church, bollards are not very welcoming, and so that may not be the best thing to do because, again, if we conflict with the mission of the organization, our security program won't last. So that's one reason. Second reason is the average church in the United States of America has 150 people or less. And so the majority of churches don't have the resources to put those bollards in. So I think obviously if you're a church like some of the churches were our friends in Nigeria, you've got a church in the Middle East or mosques in the Middle East, and that's a threat, absolutely, that's probably going to be the case. Here in the U.S. right now, probably not. So conflict avoidance, number one. Number two, the resources may not be available. And three, the pastor may just say, no, we're not doing that. And the pastor or the elders run the church, and if they say no, then that's just the case. Okay, good question, Jimmy. All right, general characteristics about the adversary. Let's talk about it real quick. So, 184 vehicle attacks worldwide since 1963. So this is not a new tactic. Okay, however, 128 of those have occurred since 2014. So after the push or the encouragement from jihadists in 2010, this has become a tactic. Okay, so it's not new, but the lethality in the attacks has increased, which means the body count has increased. Okay, 49%. So this is a little bit different than most of our attackers. 49% of the adversaries so far suffer from some sort of mental illness. That accounts for 43% of the fatalities. So 43% of the fatalities in these attacks were due to someone that suffered from mental illness, the adversary. 10% of the adversaries were motivated by jihadist ideology. And again, from the adversary standpoint, this requires pre-planning, rehearsals, etc. So it must be planned. Not a new tactic. Some of those statistics may be surprising. They were surprising to me when I started to research. Okay, so when we start to talk about pre-planning, so this is a quick news story about the attack in New York and the attacker. He planned this attack. It was premeditated. Actually rented the Home Depot truck he used, I think, the week before. Took the Home Depot truck to the attack site and rehearsed or drove around the area driving through that attack route a week or a couple of days before the actual attack. So this gets into, again, that pre-attack planning. And then if we go back to the attack that happened at the Catholic Church in Ocala, Florida, as that suspect was taken into custody, he admitted to the police that he had planned that attack also. Okay.
Image tonight, take a look. A photo taken by a neighbor in New Jersey of his own car, but right there in the background, 9 days before the attack, a Home Depot pickup truck. Tonight, authorities believe the suspect might have rented that truck for a trial run through New York days ago. Here's ABC's chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross.
A new video tonight shows some of the victims of the attack just before terror struck. A group of friends from Argentina, all smiles, biking down New York's West Side. It was around the same time across the river in New Jersey that prosecutors say Sayfullah Saipov was at a Home Depot store, seen in this new photo. Preparing to rent the truck, police say he has now confessed to using to kill 8 people, including 5 of those tourists from Argentina. Today, federal agents were canvassing the neighborhood in Paterson, New Jersey, where Saipov lived. One of the neighbors took this photo in front of Saipov's building, showing a Home Depot rental truck in the background. The photo was taken October 22nd, the day prosecutors say Saipov did a dry run of his attack with a Home Depot truck.
The same truck, same model.
Saipov came to the U.S. from Uzbekistan in 2010 under what's called the Diversity Immigrant Visa Program. And then, once here, Saipov helped some 23 other Uzbeks to come to the U.S., including 2 men suspected of terror ties.
One of the things investigators will look at after this incident is whether there is any type of network or cell that's operating in this country from Uzbekistan.
In fact, at least 9 Uzbek immigrants have been convicted or are awaiting trial on terror charges in the U.S. Tonight, 6 of the victims of this week's attack remain hospitalized. But others are getting back to their lives.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Including a 17-year-old boy who was one of the students inside the school bus ran by Saipov's truck. School officials say he returned to school today, saying he was working on 100% attendance for the year, and he knew a lot of people wanted to help him.
Good to see him go back to school.
All right. So we talk about a couple of things you saw in the video. Number one, the planning, the premeditation, the rehearsals, the thing it takes to conduct a vehicle attack, and that's with anybody that commits this kind of attack. And number two, we went back into some of the thinking behind using a vehicle. So they want to plow into large crowds, drive into buildings where there's large crowds contained inside, parades, and then of course talking about ramming other vehicles. And there you saw where he used the Home Depot truck to ram that school bus and cause injuries. All right, let's get into our prevention strategy. All right, this is what you guys have been waiting on, I'm sure. So number one, and we're going to get into some of the, I think one of the questions, we'll kind of address it again. Physical security design features, you've heard this before, especially ministries. I cannot stress this enough with church security teams. None of this, or anybody in protection, this is not about response. This is not about guns. The gun will not stop the vehicle. You must see this coming before it happens. You must see the rehearsals. You must at least identify and recognize some sort of activity that appears to be suspicious in nature that may fall into the adversary attack methodology. And when I look at church attacks, as I research the attacks that have happened over the last 15 years, that cycle is much shorter than a terrorist attack. We're talking about a week to a week and a half cycle. So that surveillance, unlike a terrorist attack where it may start 2 years before, that process starts, or the process that we can actually detect, starts a week to a week and a half before the attack. It's there. So when we talk about physical security design features, remember, concentric rings of protection, those elements of that effective physical protection system, which the 2 most important are deterrence, the ability to convince that adversary that your target's going to be probably too tough to attack, or your church, that detection, that identification of adversary activity, and then that delay is going to be slowing down somehow. If it's that person's on foot, it's going to be you physically. If they're in a vehicle, it might be a firearm. Good luck. And then, of course, that response function is always last. Deterrence and detection are always first. So remember your physical design strategy. It's security by design, not target hardening, especially for churches. Number one, because the security by design, those concentric rings of protection, that deterrence, that detection, and then, of course, that conflict avoidance. We don't want to conflict with the mission of the church, which is to spread the good news of Jesus Christ and to get the people inside there and give them the good news. Or right now, we're streaming it online. The security program cannot conflict with that. It cannot. Okay? So when we start to talk about bollards, vehicle barrier systems, number one, if your church has the resource for that, there's probably some more innovative ways to think about stopping a vehicle attack. Okay? One of that could be calling me or Scott and going through our Israeli security concept or some of these CPS modules for $60. So if you've got the resources to put vehicle barriers up, you've probably got other resources to look at a more effective and more innovative way that fits in with the mission than a vehicle barrier system. Again, we talked about most churches don't have the resources to do that. Average church in the United States has 150 people or less. It's not like the churches that where Scott and I are serving and where we're managing teams. It's not the case. The majority of churches are small. The resources are very, very tight and limited, and they won't be able to do this. And the pastor may just say no. The elders may say no. There'd be a lot of churches that are going to say no to that, and I don't blame them. I saw something else where somebody talked about like taking trucks and putting them in front doors or backing them up to where a vehicle can't run into it. Again, more than likely the pastor or the elders may say no. And again, the probability of this may be low, but again, it could be on your threat spectrum. You still need to look at it. Maintain a relationship with your local law enforcement folks in your fusion centers. I've told you guys this before, so if you go back and we talk about the characteristics of the attacker, this is why law enforcement, like communication with them, is important. So remember, they can use their personal vehicles, they can rent a vehicle, or they can steal a vehicle. So if you get, if you're talking to your police, or if you're talking to your local law enforcement guys and ladies, and you can start to talk to them and get reports about stolen vehicles to see, hey, like a box truck got stolen just up the road from us and they hadn't found it. And look, we noticed some activity 2 weeks ago that was weird in the parking lot, and I think we saw a box truck. That's information that you would need to know to be able to prevent that attack. Fusion centers. Fusion centers have restricted information, things that they can't release to you, but they also have information that they can share with you to include crime stats that can help you determine if you might have a problem. So it's a good idea to keep into contact with those folks and talk to them. Again, their job is not prevention, it's not physical protection. I spent many years in law enforcement, about 11 and a half years as a full-time officer at a 1,300-man police department. I teach criminal justice to police officers that are finishing their bachelor's degrees now part-time. I've trained police officers all over the country, and something I learned and still continue to learn is law enforcement or that concept in our country is not about protection. Security is about protection. So we don't expect them to protect us because there's no constitutional requirement for them to do it, but there's information they can give us that they can help us with that will help us protect and prevent an attack at our church or our ministry or house of worship. Training that is, number one, relevant. I see this all the time. Relevant means it applies to your ministry. Look, it's cool to get gun training, but you see, and I'm telling you from experience, from conducting vehicle assaults and rams to stop bad guys to teaching highly trained security professionals how to conduct a vehicle assault. A pistol is not going to stop the vehicle, okay? So pistols are great. You need to have them, especially if your church signs off on that. You guys are meeting the insurance requirements, and you are trained in response. When we talk about relevant training, something that's going to help you prevent that attack, and it has to do with the ministry and church security, okay? Reliable, that information is going to be valuable, and you can use it. Your church security team can use that information every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Saturday. Whenever your church or house of worship has a function and you're serving, you can use that information every time you're standing post. And then, of course, it has to be reasonable. Man, for ministries, that's number one for a lot because they don't have a lot of resources. And so when we talk about reasonable, it means the pricing has to be reasonable. I'm board certified in security management, physical security through a big international organization. Every year I have to get so many CEUs to continue to keep these certifications. I just finished a very, very expensive course from some people that I highly respect out on the West Coast that do a lot of executive protection stuff. It was expensive. It was all like webinar-based stuff, and it was high. It was really expensive. There weren't a bunch of church security ministries that were able to get into that symposium to watch because of the pricing of it. So what you choose has to be reasonable also. You have to be able to afford it. And if the church or the ministry or the house of worship can't, and you're having to fork that out of your own pocket, then again, it's got to be reasonable. Use of a suspicious activity report. If you're not implementing a surveillance detection program and the use of SARs or suspicious activity reports, you need to do that now. Okay? Look it up online. You can find one online. We teach you how to do this both in CPS and in the Israeli security concept. The SAR is a document where someone on post, and when they're trained to stand post and what it is they're supposed to look for, what they're identifying, they document that information on that report. That report has to be disseminated amongst the other church security team members, and you must communicate that, and you must go through that information and disseminate and validate it. And that has to be done every Sunday. If you pick up something that report's done, then you have to go through that process. That is another part of your prevention strategy. This is your detection strategy. This also is going to help you deter because you're out there watching, you're looking like you're supposed to. Basic security planning when you return to service and special events. Think about what you're doing as you bring people back in the church because of this COVID issue, and as you have special events, especially if they're outside. What do you need to be looking for? What do your security personnel need to be posted, especially if you've got people wandering around in open areas where a vehicle could get to them if that was going to be the method of attack or the means of the attack? What does that mean, and what does that planning look like? Are you specifically planning for this if you think it's a requirement? And what does that look like? What does that mean? And have you shared that information with the church? Basic detection strategies. Remember, you watch this. You've heard me talk about it in these case studies. Surveillance. You need a surveillance detection program. They're going to conduct surveillance. That's that first step in that threat assessment process for them. They're going to observe the target. Route selection. This is your rehearsal stuff. This is where you can see someone practicing that attack because they're choosing their route. We start talking about key terrain in that process for threat assessments for the adversary. This is where you're going to see it. And, of course, we talk about rehearsals again. Okay? I gave you this quote last week from the Irish Republican Army in our terrorism seminar. Okay? This was in 1984, 81 or 84, when they tried to assassinate the Prime Minister. Okay, so when they attempted to assassinate Margaret Thatcher, and they were not successful. Today we were unlucky, but remember, we only have to be lucky once. They're talking to the British government. You will have to be lucky always. Take luck out of this. Prevent the attack. I don't care if it's a vehicle attack. I don't care if it's an active shooter. I cannot sit here and preach this enough. You do not want to have to respond, especially if you're a volunteer security ministry. Go back to the video of the attack in December of 19. Yeah, there was a guy that was there that did respond and stop the attack, but only after 2 people were killed. And in our business, that's called consequence. That's a consequence we cannot afford. We must prevent the attack. How do you prevent the attack, folks? We've got CPS Module 1 coming up August the 16th, 1 to 4:30. You can do it from the comfort of your home in your jammies with chocolate chip pancakes all over your mouth. We're not going to see you. You can turn the camera off. Okay? That is $75 for Module 1. We've got the Israeli Security Concept Threat Identification coming up on August the 23rd, 1 to 4:30. This is the most important training that you can take as a security professional, especially in a ministry. I have used this. I studied this in Israel in 2011. I actually taught this to our nuclear security officers at a couple of our sites, and this has been taught at our churches here locally. I have very specifically, of the security personnel I taught this to at these nuke sites, were able to pick up hostile surveillance, and we think numerous times, and we think able to stop an attack on a nuke site here in this country. Second, we used this at Fellowship Bible Church several years ago, and it averted or it stopped a criminal attack against the church. We know we were given information from law enforcement. This is the most important class that you can take as a church security ministry or member of a church security team. And there are 2 modules. They are $60 a piece. This information, I know I just took it. A company paid for me to do it when I went through this Protector Symposium or I watched it. This same information I'm giving you was $300 to $400 from other people. So it's reliable, it's relevant, and it is reasonable. It's the most important thing you can take. It is the way you prevent the attacks. I cannot tell you enough, folks. Our job as protectors is to both detect it early, deter it, and prevent it. Q&A. Any questions, Scott? All right, here we go. What we got?
So our friend Ann over in Nigeria.
Nice. Hello, Ann. Welcome.
I think it's about 1 o'clock in the morning over there. So.
It's late.
It's late. How do we convince church leaders to change their mindset about security and convince them to have trained security persons and volunteers for the security team?
Yep. I think one, Ann, now that you found our website, go to our website. We have now 18 videos. Go through those videos. Start to pick out information about very specific threat-related or design-basis threat information. And then if you need that from us, email Scott or me, Scott M, or contact, and you've got my email address. We talked this week. We'll send that information to you. Share that information with your church, and then let them know what you're doing. You're coming through CPS next month. Tell them that you are doing that on your own time because you understand it's important. So go through those videos, extract that information, give that to them, tell them what you are doing. And you've also got somebody in Lagos, also in Nigeria there. Maybe he's at the same church, Charles, who's already went through CPS Module 1. Maybe we connect you guys if you don't already know him, and he can assist you with that because I think his church already understands. But again, send us an email, send us a message. We'll help you through that process.
I've got John. I think he's from Florida, but I can't quite tell by the profile. He says, my church is in a street front building. What from this topic applies to a vehicle accident?
So I think he's asking a motor vehicle accident?
Motor vehicle accident.
Like how to stop a motor vehicle accident?
Doesn't specifically
Yep.
say.
So let me just, so it sounds like because you're on a street front, you're worried about motor vehicle accidents. So same thing. So here's what I would do. Here's something we didn't add in because we're talking about attacks. Number one, your people are watching out front. Okay. So you've got a security team member. Go ahead.
So he adds to that, like where the vehicle leaves the road and comes close to the church.
Okay. So he's concerned about that because it's a motor vehicle accident?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so if you've got, number one, concentric rings of protection. Your physical security measures also apply to safety. So if you're practicing those concentric rings, that person that's at that position, that's standing post, put something that's like a vest or something that somebody can see on them. So if there is a motor vehicle accident or somebody's not paying attention, they see that. And two, you can also put safety measures like cones or something else that's bright that people are going to pay attention to. Does that make sense? I hope that helped. I don't know if that helped them or not. Okay, but your physical protection measures also apply to your physical protection measures also apply to your safety stuff. Most of what you're going to have to do is going to be safety related anyway. Anything else?
So John says, my church is in a shopping center, and we convinced the church leadership and the landlord that bollards are necessary. We got permission and had them installed, and the landlord paid the expense. So in that
Good.
scenario, fantastic.
Excellent. Yep. If you've got the resources and you believe that's in your threat spectrum, then go for it. Is that it? Okay, folks. Hey, for our folks that are, this is awesome. We are blessed to have people from Nigeria. We had people from the Middle East last week, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, Abu Dhabi. We've had some folks from the Czech Republic. Mm-hmm. International folks that are watching, and it's like early in the morning. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending time with us. This almost an hour I've gone over. Everybody that's joined in, that continues to join in, thank you again so much. We really appreciate you guys watching us. We hope you guys are helping, or we're helping you guys, especially if you're a ministry, a church, or some house of worship, whether that's a church, a temple, a mosque. We hope the information we're giving you is going to be helpful. Law enforcement folks, if you're still with us, please tune back in. We're going to continue to do this, and we're glad you're here. And, of course, security professionals and volunteer ministries, please email us if you have any questions. Again, we're gonna kick it off next week. We'll make that announcement here in the next day or two what the topic's going to be, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 4 p.m. And remember, folks, it is about prevention, not response.